Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, so we're back after a nice weekend without the old FPL. A total relax, no ups, no downs, no roller coaster, no feeling grumpy at a captain missing a penalty, and I almost totally forgot what a Darwin Nunez is. But yes, we're back now as we shape up for a weird novelty in the upcoming game week. That stretched out, halved up one that's going to coming up in game week 21, and then a slightly less kind of busy schedule beyond after a hectic Christmas period. And it's all for us to dissect and analyze in this zoomed in pod. Joined by Sam, as mentioned, also joined today by Dan, aka FPL Blackwolf, who's traded the glamour of Wolverhampton for the dark, dingy, and altogether terrible surroundings of the west coast of the USA. Hello, mate. Great to have you on the pod. Could you introduce yourself to the good people who don't know you?
Sure. First off, thank you for having me on. Tom, as you know, I've been a fan of this podcast for a long time. And Pricey, you've been an excellent addition. So I listen every week. It's really, really great. So I'm excited to be here. I'm Dan, FPL Blackwolf on Twitter, or X as they say now. I'm a huge Wolves fan, first and foremost. I've been playing FPL for a long, long time, on and off. Kind of a semi-casual, let's say. I'm not super hardcore about it, but, you know, it's in all of our blood, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's one of those things. I think once you get the bug, you just can't shake it. Like, even though I think when I was watching, I tried to watch Arsenal yesterday a little bit, so I didn't completely forget about football. I did forget about FPL, but I say I forgot about it. But even then, I was thinking, goals and assists, and tallying up like the points totals that possibly could have come in for each of the players. I was thinking, Trent would definitely on free bonus despite getting the yellow card. So, is it sad? Is it fun? I'm not sure where I sit on that anymore. But hey, anyway, yeah, great to have you on.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're on an FPL podcast, so I'm going to say it's fun, but to any outsiders out there, if my girlfriend's listening, it's definitely sad. But anyway, as I was saying, we are Who Got the Assist. Thank you so much for coming on, Dan. It's going to be hopefully a really entertaining show today as we prepare for the weeks ahead. Obviously, last week we were having a little bit of a retrospective look back at the first half of the season. This week, we're zooming back in and we're having a look at the next few weeks. Obviously, with the immediate horizon being filled with the thoughts of what we're going to do with the likes of Salah and Son in our FPL teams. And of course, Haaland's re-entry is imminent. If not game week 21, then possibly game week 22. So we've got to think about all of that and the shifting fixtures and potentially even some doubles and blanks in our pretty near horizon now. It's not too many game weeks away when we need to start considering those things. So we're going to start thinking about that through the use of some planning aids, which we've got prepared for you today, and obviously list of priorities for our teams, which hopefully will help you if you're listening in to the show. As always, we'll have our bold claims. We took a break from that last week because there was no game week in between. So we'll bring that back this week. And of course, we've got some listener Q&A at the end as well. And I think we might dot one or two in during the show too. It is the 8th of January. The FA Cup fourth round draw, I think it must be, has just been drawn. So we're coming in hot off the back of that. So if we get any information wrong on that, we do apologize, but we've got it up on our phones. So we know who the fixtures are. We'll try and figure out the permutations on the go. But of course, we've still got the Carabao Cup fixtures in the midweek yet to come. So we don't have all the information on that yet, but I think we'll hopefully have enough data and information to go on and help you plan out for the next few weeks ahead. But with that, shall we have a quick look back at the scores on the doors, Tom?
Yeah, I think are we up first or is Dan up first? Oh, okay. Well, that's my team, isn't it? Yeah. God, it's been so long. It's been so long. So last week we spoke about it a tiny bit. 92 last week for me, up to 489k. Was in the doldrums of 700k after a few pretty terrible weeks. And the key headline was removing Martinelli finally for Foden, which is very nice indeed. And there's looking like there's loads of hopium now about Foden being a really good pick, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Start of the new year on a green arrow, and hopefully the trajectory continues upwards. Yes, that's a quick one. And you're Sam?
Yep, so I'm next up, 87, little bit worse off than you, but still enough for a green arrow. 348k now from 430, so gained about 80,000 places, I think. Salah captain, all returns across my front seven. So all the midfielders, all the strikers got something or other. And my defense and goalkeepers got absolutely sod all. So I think it was 3 points between my entire goalkeeper and defensive lineup, and 84 between the rest. So very top heavy side. But pretty happy with the performance overall. Game week rank of just under 1 million. So that's usually a green arrow at this stage. So pretty happy. And with that, let's have a look at our special guest. Dan, please walk us through your team quickly.
It's a good week to go on, I think.
It
is.
I
had 98 points and it halved my rank down to 42k.
Boo!
Wow.
Hiss.
Wow.
Just showing us up. We keep getting
Just
guests on who are doing much better than we are. I'm not sure whether that casts us in a good light or a bad light. We're just the supporting cast here, really.
My transfer was Gordon out for Foden, so that turned out pretty well. And then Areola came good on the Monday night or whatever it was to get the 11 points.
Boo! Hiss.
So similar teams to you guys here, apart from the Areola, really.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. And you even had a goalkeeper return on your bench as well. So whichever you picked was always going to work out pretty nicely. And I think Tom and I timed the Areola transfer about as poorly as any FPL manager could have. So fair play for staying with him. I don't know whether you stayed with him throughout the injury as well. I assume you did by bringing in Dubravka and just starting him.
I bought in Dubravka for Turner instead, and then I've had Areola on my bench for all of his hauls. So it's nice to finally get one. In that exactly. In that Liverpool game when Dubravka saved that Salah penalty, I was just furious. Like, oh my god, here we go again. And then Areola comes and gets 3 more points. So that was nice.
I mean, Dubravka at halftime looked like he was on for an absolute monster haul, like one of the best keeper hauls I've ever seen. But luckily, as Salah captain, as we pulled through. But with that, obviously, great game week score for you. You're absolutely flying this season, so it's great to have you on the pod. Tom, next time, please make sure you bring on someone that is below us in rank. It might be quite difficult to do, but please try and find someone who doesn't embarrass us.
I'll scour the roster in the Content Creator League and see if I can get somebody who's in the doldrums just to get them on so we can feel superior. Very well done, Dan. Have you historically done fairly well in FPL?
No, I well, it depends what you say as well. I tend to finish under 100k each season, but I'm never anywhere near the top 10k. I'm usually 50k, 60k, 70k range.
Oh, that's good.
I would say that's good.
I'm consistent, let's say that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, that's very good. Cool. All right, let's get on with the main topic today. And it is, I suppose, I think the key question really is managing the exits of Son and Salah, as Sam mentioned. But there's a lot to come over January, and just kind of following on from last week's pod, where we took a zoom out look at the kind of the first half of the season, as we kind of broach the second half. Well, no, it's kind of just over half, but you know what I mean. And there's lots of decisions to be made, lots of things to be done. But I think kind of in the immediate sphere, we'll be using a couple of resources just to help us kind of plan through, especially when it comes to those Son and Salah moves. I think we'll kind of try to base this mostly on our teams, just because it's difficult to kind of cover off all the angles and think about absolutely every situation you could possibly be in. For what it's worth, I know that Sam is fairly close to kind of the template situation. I think there was live FPL tweeted the other day that there's this kind of the one mostly cloned team out there, which is owned by Andy and friend of the pod, Harry. I think Sam and Dan as well. I think both your teams are quite similar to that. Mine's a little bit esoteric, but hopefully from that discussion, you'll be able to get kind of something to help you kind of progress along, especially kind of, as I said, speaking about those midfielder movements, both now and over the next few weeks. If you're watching on YouTube, we are using, just as a visual aid, like Sam mentioned, just something small this week. Last week, there was kind of loads of XG data and things like that in it. This week, it's just a couple of things. So the fixture analyzer from Fantasy Football Hub, other fixture tickers things are available elsewhere. This is not a hub ad, which give kind of one number for how good the upcoming fixtures are for a particular team. And then the data from the FPL.team fixtures with the colorations, plus the Planet FPL projected fixtures, which just need to reiterate they're projected fixtures. So please do not take the fact that there's a blank for a few teams being projected here and double few teams being projected here to be kind of completely true, and they're just what James has predicted or had predicted before the last time it was updated. So we're going to go with that for now, and just to give us an idea of a signpost, I suppose, for what we can talk about. I suppose first off, for this upcoming period, starting with you, Dan, your team's obviously very well set and you're performing fairly decently overall, much more decent than me and Sam are anyway. What is your plan for moving off the big guns, Salah and Son, going forward? Have you got 2 free transfers? One? Like, where are you?
Yeah, I've only got one free transfer, unfortunately. So I have to pick one of them to take out. And I also already have Bowen in my team, so I have to keep my eye on that situation too. I think Son out first is the more likely scenario, just in case we get to the point where we might want to keep Salah. I think some people are now talking about possibly keeping him on the bench until he's back. So that's something I might consider. The big decision I have to make is I don't have any Arsenal assets in midfield. That's something I've been doing for a long time, and it's been working out pretty well for me and differentiating from the template. So I have to kind of decide, do I want to take out Son and bring in someone like Saka? But it just seems like such a boring move. So that's the decision I have to make.
I feel you. It's definitely something that we've started to talk about last week, and something that me and Sam, took a break from FPL really, but we've been speaking a lot. It's kind of the last couple of days just about kind of what we do next. And you and me, Dan, both non-Saka owners, and you may well have heard that I hate Martinelli's guts. But there was always an idea that Saka would be the man who come in here. And I don't know, like, even though there's been, as we spoke about last week, the performances in terms of the outcomes haven't been good. The underlying data has remained good. And if you watch I only watched the highlights because childcare and stuff, but watching the highlights of the Arsenal-Liverpool game, for example, like Saka could have easily gotten a goal, got an assist, and if you got unlucky, got another goal as well. And some of the data that's coming through from loads of people, especially that on Twitter, the likes of, I think, Scott Willis, Cannon Stats, he was kind of saying that in terms of the underlying kind of XG versus output, it's incredible that Arsenal haven't scored more than kind of the 3 or 4 goals they've actually scored over the last few games. Like, it's really, really unfortunate. And it's a case of kind of, I don't know, seeing whether you back them or back us, in my case, to turn it around over the course of the next sort of few fixtures, which are quite good. They're not terrible, and they're not great by any stretch of imagination, but not terrible. Crystal Palace and Forest up next, Liverpool, West Ham, Burnley, and Newcastle. And I'd broadly say kind of 3 of 4 or 5 of the next 6, you kind of back us to scoring at least. And Saka being the main man, still putting up the great underlying data, as we mentioned last week. I know it's boring, and it's certainly something that I've been kind of thinking about. Like, is this an opportunity for me to continue to back against the template? But I don't know. I simply don't exactly see, and we'll get into it in a little bit, exactly where to go, because I own Foden as well, and so do you, Dan. So that's kind of off the table. Bowen is one that I'm not too sure on at the moment, and we'll talk about that too. So it kind of feels like Saka's kind of just the case of just getting it done, getting my arse covered, and kind of I'll go from there, especially because I've got an inkling that there's going to be quite a lot of people going there defaulting to him for the captaincy for the moment. I mean, Sam, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, so Saka's an interesting one because the data is still really strong, and like you said the other day, he's still getting plenty of chances. It just feels like Arsenal are getting jitters in front of goal a little bit at the moment, and considering the underperformance on the XG, especially over the previous 3 matches, not necessarily game weeks, but matches across all competitions, I think they're a team that I expect to bounce back. I expect them to actually start returning on that underlying data again in the near future. And Saka is a big part of that underlying data. So it's how long you can kind of back against Arsenal returning to what you would consider to be their mean, their average. Now, there is an argument that this could continue. However, they do have a little bit of a break, obviously, to reset and hopefully get a few bodies back in, and also rest the legs a little bit. And definitely. I do wonder if there's a team talk coming in the back, maybe an all or nothing style motivational speech going on behind the scenes with a head and a heart, and all that sort of stuff that Arteta loves to do. So I wonder if that moment is coming behind the scenes where they're just like, right, guys, wake up, let's get this out of our system, and then there will be one big sort of explosion, and all of a sudden they're back to normal. And with the fixtures, 3 of the next 4, in fact, 4 of the next 5 are good enough for me to say I still wouldn't be worried about bringing in an Arsenal asset, even if the last few game weeks, Saka was very lucky to get the goal last week. So I'm kind of discounting that a little bit and saying that generally they've been underperforming. I think generally speaking, I still expect them to get back to what we more commonly know them as. And I wouldn't say by any means, as I've been saying to you privately, Tom, that I don't think Saka is an essential must buy right now. But because a few of the other options that we're going to discuss today have quite a lot of pros, but also most of them have at least one major con each. Saka is one of those players that gets 90 minutes every week. He is on penalties quite a lot of the time. The fixtures are still good. No blank in game week 26. So it does tick a lot of the boxes, and it's a dull move, but and it is a dull move. I will give you that, but it also points are points, and if you expect him to start returning on that data, then you want to score. You want to have those points in your team, regardless of the ownership. So I'm pretty happy having him, and I know that this isn't a decision I really need to make. But I think if you don't have him, kind of put the ownership to one side and think about whether or not you actually expect him to return the points in the next few game weeks. And personally, I do.
And also, like, going without Saka the past few weeks has allowed me to bring in Foden and Bowen as my differentials, and that's how I've made up the points. But now we're losing Salah and Son. A lot of people are looking to bring in people like Bowen and Foden. So I'm losing my differential. So the risk of not having Saka, as well as the fact, as Tom said, people are going to captain him, it just seems very scary to me. I know people don't like playing the EO game, but when I'm sitting at 42k rank, I just think over this little period where we don't have Salah and Son, it might make sense just to stick with the template and then go differential in a few game weeks' time.
Especially if you're not sure on another pick. Like if there's no other picks like screaming out to you, then maybe just going safe, because you're almost hedging, I think, a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, often it kind of pays, especially in situations like this, just to keep it simple. And I completely agree with you, Dan. Like last year, part of the frustration for me was that I didn't like the fact that I was just making covering moves. But a lot of the time, you've just got to literally just plug the hole in your team and anticipate kind of potential exposure to certain players returning. And yeah, Sam said, there's definitely potentially going to be some sort of retribution, I guess, for the recent malaise seen at Arsenal. I was just chuckling to myself during the time you guys were talking, so I was trying to think what household items Mikel was going to pick up and start kind of giving a speech over. I imagine him kind of picking up a Hoover and be like, Mr. Hoover came up with this. Do you think we could live without this? You guys can't live without success. We could not live without this Hoover. Just be the vacuum guy. Anyway,
it's like he's in the room.
Yeah,
that was very good.
Eerie.
Came to my mind. Anyway, sorry. Yes, indeed. It's definitely kind of, for me and you, Dan, one that's definitely going to be on the menu. But for you, Sam, just to stay with you a little bit, I mean, you're already in a situation where you've got Saka in situ, don't have Foden, but you've kind of got the ability to get over to Bowen, who did it was an impact injury, we think, that David Moyes said after the Bristol City game. Obviously they've got the replay to come, so we'll be able to kind of have a further assessment there. Paqueta also went off injured early, and obviously Kudus is now at African Cup of Nations. So there's potentially a few questions about Bowen, but you were very hot on him coming in last week, and obviously the Sheffield United game next is a big sort of carrot to draw you in. Are you still there on bringing Bowen in?
I'm going cold. I'm definitely going cold. So there's a few factors that have changed since last week. Now, number one, obviously, you mentioned the fact we'll get that replay. That replay, to my knowledge, is next week, so it'll be after the deadline. So we won't have that information to hand, and I doubt we'll get a meaningful press conference, I think, before the deadline from Moyes. And even if we did, he rarely gives us good team news like to go off of. So I think if I made that Bowen transfer, if you're like me and you don't own him already, making that transfer is filled with at least minor risk that he doesn't play. For what it's worth, I think he will start the Sheffield United game. I'd be very surprised if he didn't, as he does recover quickly. It did look like an impact injury, like you mentioned. So I think he would play, but then other factors come into consideration as well. As you mentioned, Paquetá went off injured in the same game after already coming back from an injury, and Kudus, who maybe doesn't make a difference in terms of West Ham's creativity so much, but he's still a quality player and an outlet for them. So without those two players in their 11, and Kufal, I think, is dealing with a minor knock as well. All of these players taken out of the 11 probably make West Ham a little bit more blunt going forwards.
Yeah.
And we all know how that game is going to set up. West Ham are going to, for once, be the team with most of the ball. We know they don't like playing that way. They like springing the counters. We know they like playing fast counter-attacking football against a high line. That's where they will benefit. Sheffield United aren't going to allow them to do that. So it's whether or not they can pick that lock and enjoy being on the ball for that long. Now, even if Bowen does play, I am starting to doubt whether or not there are enough creators in that 11 that are going to be able to unlock the defence and give Bowen the chances to get several returns in one game. And because there are other options out there that have fixtures, not just for game week 21, but for a few game weeks that I quite like the look of, I think it's enough to maybe make me swerve Bowen as it stands. Now, obviously, situations can change and I'm not locking in on that, but enough has changed in the past week, I think, to make me reassess him as an option and maybe be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, he's second overall for transfers in at the moment. 700, nearly 750,000 managers have pressed the button on Bowen, but I do share your concerns, and he's definitely one that I've been. I love the fact that he's a talisman. Owned him earlier on this season, and he's been one that kind of, I think I'm worried is going to become what Saka has been recently for me. That one player that I don't own, or maybe similar to what Dan was saying about not owning Arsenal assets because of a bit of stodginess. Maybe we'll see, because of the lack of key personnel, West Ham sort of lurch into that. Like we spoke about their kind of team XG last week being kind of solidly sort of middle of the pack, below Man United, Everton, Brentford, all these sorts of teams, around the sort of Bournemouth sort of area. So it's one of those where, yes, there's definitely kind of an impetus behind him from an FPL perspective, which is going to bring the ownership into the consideration. Sheffield United and Bournemouth, the next couple, are obviously kind of quite alluring. Then you've got Man United, which is kind of quite a changeable game. Arsenal in 24, and then Forest and Brentford in 26. And their fixtures, there's nothing really to fear from now until kind of quite a while. I think, apart from the Arsenal game, you're kind of looking at kind of game week 30-ish, 29-30, when they play Newcastle and Aston Villa. I think, I can't remember which way around it is, one of those two. So yeah, it's one that you probably could buy and just kind of leave in. But I think it's an interesting question though, Dan, for you as someone who owns Bowen. You're not entirely sure about Saka. Where are you now looking? Because it then starts to get a little bit sort of convoluted, especially we'll talk about Foden in a second. You own him too. So where are you going after that point? Are you starting to kind of drag it up in the likes of, Pascal Gross? Are you looking at, Douglas Luiz? Where are you going outside of kind of the obvious kind of picks?
I mean, you've named two of them. I think Pascal Gross, Douglas Luiz, and Pedro Neto are three players I have my eye on as someone to bring in as a differential. Because as you said, I already own the assets people are going for. So unless I go make the boring move for Saka, I have to pick someone else. And even if I do go for Saka, if I want to get rid of Salah and Son, I have to pick a fifth midfielder, and it needs to be cheap because I own Trippier and I own Alexander-Arnold. I think my favourite right now is Pascal Gross, because look at those fixtures. They're just excellent consistently all the way through 26. And he seems to be getting all of the minutes. He seems to be getting returns consistently. He's on set pieces. So, I might go Pascal Gross.
On that, do you think that Pascal, just playing devil's advocate, do you think Pascal Gross is maybe slightly less attractive knowing that the likes of Mitoma, Adingra are out of the side because he's chiefly a creator, right? He's not going to be supplying loads of goal threats. So it becomes more about who he's supplying it to. Do you think that impacts him negatively at all over the next few fixtures, or would you not let that sort of thing put you off?
Yeah, I'm not overthinking it really. I'm not letting it put me off because they've been without them for the past few game weeks, and he still looked like he can return consistently, hasn't he? The last game they didn't have those players, and he looked like he could have easily gotten a double-digit haul.
Yeah,
so
fair.
I'm not too worried about it. His price puts me off a little bit because he is like 6.4, I think it is. and I think I want to go under the 6 million mark. But there's such a lack of assets right now, I feel, to pick from, that we kind of have to go for these kind of players.
Well, we spoke about this with an FPL General, didn't we, Sam? Like that, there's definitely players appearing on the menu that you'd never kind of considered before. Like if you're kind of looking for cheaper than gross, but you still want to kind of capitalize on the Brighton fixtures, you could be looking at Bonanotti, for example, or maybe even Hinchelwood. I don't know. It's these sorts of players that you never before have considered, but perhaps now are going to get a decent-ish run in the team, especially when it comes to Bonanotti. I don't know if what's his name from last year? I can't remember what his name was. The Paraguayan bloke.
Enciso.
Enciso is going to be fit anytime soon. But again, but one of these players that could well pay off if you're looking in that sort of area. And I'm kind of similar to you, Dan, because I'm in the 3-4-3. Then this week it will be kind of buying for Salah, one kind of probably almost definitely Saka, just because I'm kind of fairly I've bought into the logic really of just getting that sort of covered, and then kind of the week after that would be the enabler, which will put a hold in a second, but it'll have to be a kind of a cheaper player for me to come in and then kind of get Darwin up to Haaland. Neto's interesting though, and I know that kind of if you look at the fixtures in front of us, especially because you're here at the moment, there's definitely kind of potentially a bit of a handy sort of role that a Wolves pickup could play here, because the fixtures aren't terrible. Brighton, Man United, Chelsea, Brentford offer a really successful Christmas period as well. Even the Spurs game, which has come out in red, that's not a game that I kind of worry about in terms of you guys scoring, as we spoke about in terms of the XGC. And in 26, when we are projecting blanks, or James from Planet is projecting blanks for Chelsea, Luton, Liverpool and Spurs, you guys got Sheffield United at home, so a Wolves player could play a really kind of key role really for you, if you are to bring one in and kind of rotate one around. If you've got a decent sort of fourth defender, you've got a decent third striker, you want to mess around with those. I mean, Pedro Neto, talk us through it. How fit is he? Is he ready to come in and be a force to reckon with again?
I think so. With Hwang being out, I think we're going to rely on Neto's creativity. The last game when he played, he looked really, really excellent for the last 15 minutes. He was just on fire. He looks like he hasn't been out, to be honest. And I actually prefer Neto than Hwang. I'm in the minority here. I know Hwang has been getting the returns, but watching Neto play, he just looks like he's going to be involved in absolutely every goal we score. And games like Tottenham away are perfect for Neto because he's so good on the counter-attack. So I would have no qualms about starting him away to Tottenham, for example. Yeah. In fact, I'd be more worried playing him against Sheffield United than I would against Tottenham. I think he's an excellent asset. I think he's fully fit, and he's cheap. So
he's already got 9 returns this season as well, doesn't he? Off of like half of the games.
Yep.
Not bad.
Yeah, I think people still have a misconception that Wolves are a bad team and we can't score. It still exists from people today, and it's just not true anymore. We score quite freely, and we're a very attacking side. And in fact, it's our defense you want to worry about a little bit. I sounded so American then, defense. But yeah, I think having a Wolves attacker in your team, Pedro Neto, I don't see anything against that. I really don't.
That's a really interesting call, actually. I think because I'm fairly kind of locked in. I think when I buy Saka, I'll have a midfield of Saka, Foden, Palmer. Yeah, Gordon potentially is one of those sort of players that, all right, next couple, Man City and Villa, I'm probably okay to kind of shove him on the bench. So it might be good to have a kind of a Neto sort of insurance policy almost. A player like that. He's maybe a tad too expensive, but he's not that expensive at 5.6. No, a really good sort of, it's always one of those price points that people will say, oh, it's really awkward, so you're not really sure what you're doing. But I think he's actually a decent call, especially as you say, he's back fit. I'm not sure that Cunha is going to be the man who's going to be kind of converting those chances. And I think that's kind of the key question really for me. I've got Cunha in draft, Dan. That's how cool I am. I've had him since the start of the season. I love him as a kind of football manager sort of asset. For me, even though he's kind of doing well in terms of his expected goals versus his expected goal involvements versus his actual sort of output. He does kind of feel like one that's kind of frustrate a little bit. One that if he was more widely owned, there would be a much more sort of howls of derision about him potentially. I mean, do you think that without Hwang, there's going to be some sense of lack of conversion perhaps at Wolves? Because Hwang, notably, is a bit like his compatriot Son in being quite a deadly finisher. Is that going to be a problem, do you think?
Yeah, he's a deadly finisher, and I think we will miss that. But I don't think we're gonna be hit too hard from it. I really don't. I think with Cunha and Neto, and there's someone like Bellegarde or Sarabia on the other side, I still think we're forced to be reckoned with in attack. And also, we've lost Sasha Kalajdzic now. He's gone on loan to Germany. We've also lost Fabio Silva, who's gone on loan to Rangers. So I fully expect us to make a striker signing in the next couple of weeks. So I'm keeping my eye on that situation too.
Danny
Because
Ings?
if we get an elite striker in,
So Danny Ings are getting whispers.
oh, Danny Ings, no, absolutely not.
Hey, Southampton over it.
I'm sorry. Who knows? Who knows? But he doesn't seem like a fit.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree. On that note, FN in the chat asks who's on penalties now with Hwang on. Could you share any insight on that?
I think it would be Cunha. In fact, I think even with Hwang in the team, I think it's Cunha. I think he just gave it to Hwang for that one penalty because Hwang won it. But
okay.
I do think Cunha is first choice penalty taker.
Interesting.
Nice.
If there weren't so many decent forward options, Cunha could come into it a little bit more. But I think there are at least 3 that most people would want a little bit more at the moment.
That's the problem. You have Haaland, you have Solanke, you have Watkins, you have Darwin. So people aren't really looking at Cunha. But he's been consistently returning for a few weeks now and getting his owners a lot of points.
He has been. So I love him on draft. He's definitely kind of repaying what happened with Football Manager when he became a bit of a god. Donna in the chat says she's gone off Bowen and cannot justify the spend for Saka at the present time, which is definitely reflecting what you said earlier on, Dan. She's got a phone. We'll speak about him in a second. But she says she's thinking about Jota. She'd rather have 60 minutes of Jota than 90 minutes of Saka right now and just hold Salah. And we've kind of spoken about as well. And I suppose Liverpool just kind of sobbing in a Liverpool kind of player and thinking that he's going to be sort of the stand-in talisman for Salah. It's been something that we've spoken about a fair bit. In the midfield slot, I know Szoboszlai has got an injury for the next couple of weeks, so he'll be missing. One that kind of FPL General did mention as a player that he was looking at. But you have Diogo Jota, you've got Luis Diaz, who put Arsenal to the sword this weekend. So a couple of options potentially there as well. Sam, you said you really like Jota to me not very long ago, and he's definitely one that I can definitely get on board with. A natural finisher, according to many Liverpool fans that I've spoken to, and the player most likely to be sort of returning potentially without Mr. Salah being around. Any sort of temptation around going for just a straight swap within the same team and going to a Jota?
Yeah, there's plenty of temptation there. He is a very clinical finisher, as we know, and with Salah not being there anymore and him back to full fitness, we hope by game week 21, I think he makes a lot of sense. He's at a decent price point. His conversion and his underlying data is always really strong, not at the same level as Salah, but it is comparable enough at a much lower price point. And of course, now we're looking at 4 forwards into those 3 spots rather than 5. So Jota should get good minutes. If he's fit, he always gets some minutes. It's just whether or not he'll regularly get the 65, 70, or whether he'll get too many of those substitute appearances, which would probably be enough to put me off going for him. The other, not issue, but the other thing that you need to consider with bringing in additional Liverpool assets is those permutations around game week 25 and game week 26, because we do start thinking about the blanks and the doubles around that time. And if you want to pile more heavily into Liverpool without having Salah in your side, you probably have to consider what that means for your chip strategy around that period in the season as well. So that's one thing I'm weighing up at the moment, because in game week 25, it's not on the ticker here, but it is possible that Liverpool double with the Luton game potentially moving back from game week 26 to 25 if they go through in the Carabao. So that is possible. It's not obviously locked in, but if that were to happen, then possibly free hitting in game week 25 would make a lot of sense, because anyone trying to get back to Salah could quite easily just free hit him back in game week 25 when he's around that sort of time. He'll be coming back anyway, we expect anyway. And therefore you brought in Jota for a run of fixtures, and then you're free hitting him out of the side and then have him back for the blank in game week 26, which seems a little bit counterintuitive. So I am a little bit worried about that and what that would mean for that potential chip strategy. But if you go with the other side and you think, oh, I could just free hit in game week 26, then having that extra Liverpool asset in 25 locked in case they do double could be really interesting. It's just, is it the right Liverpool asset if you're getting Salah back in around that time as well? I'm not so sure, but it is definitely an interesting option for the 3 or 4 game weeks if he gets decent minutes, which we think he'll get 65, 70 on average. I think he is going to be explosive enough to pay off.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of those where I can see the appeal a lot. It's just I think that for me the priority is probably just covering my bases, which sounds a bit boring and maybe something I should think about a bit more given my overall rank. But it's definitely kind of one that I've definitely been thinking about a lot, and I definitely like the look of. Historically, obviously, he's played very well, as Daniel, you'll know, as an ex-Wolves player too, and one of those players who I think you can just. Every kind of season, I think there's been kind of a small period, small kind of a spate of game weeks where he is fit, and he does kind of assume that responsibility in terms of being a key provider for Liverpool. Remember last year, he was in our teams. I think it was just before Christmas. He kind of had a run in our teams of about kind of 5 or 6 game weeks, and at least he was in template for that. Performed very well, and then got himself injured. So it might be kind of a period where you'd be looking at Jota on his way back from injury, and obviously low owned as well. So kind of one of those sort of uber differentials, maybe Dan, and that you may be considering if you're not interested too much in getting Saka. I mean, what's your view on Jota? Maybe also Luis Diaz.
Yeah, I love Jota. I think he's a great asset. He looks dangerous every game, but as Sam has been saying, I'm concerned about his minutes. That's the one thing that's putting me off. If I was certain that he'd get 70 minutes at least every game, I'd have no hesitation making him my priority transfer in, especially against Bournemouth and Chelsea. Perfect games for him, I feel. So I love him. I just don't know if I'm brave enough to go there because I don't want to see him benched when I already have a weak bench and injury issues elsewhere.
Yeah, a lot of that kind of comes into it. But I mean, he's got a similar sort of XG per 90, speaking to your point about him looking dangerous, as Ollie Watkins this year, which kind of just underlines the sort of player he is. Better XG per 90 than the likes of Jared Bowen, for example, which in a team like Liverpool would be charging to create chances because you've got Trent, you've got the revamped midfield, albeit without Endo now, but you've still kind of got that kind of semblance of a machine designed to create chances for an individual. It's been created for Darwin, who's missing them, and then Salah. So maybe Jota's going to take over that mantle. The thing is, obviously, that Salah has also been, as we kind of saw last week, with the great assist for Gakpo, and just his general sort of industry, also heavily involved in that chance creation within the system. So him missing, is that going to stymie what we're seeing with Jota? Well, we kind of saw against Arsenal. Obviously, kind of towards the end of the game, that's when Liverpool kind of really kind of kicked in and hit us with a sucker punch. But other than that, with the fixtures to come, maybe you'd be kind of thinking, yeah, decent enough for Liverpool to be going in on. Bournemouth up next, and then Chelsea, who, yeah, good for XGC, not amazing. Arsenal 23, and then 24, that game against Burnley, and then 25 against Brentford, who are defensively very good, but kind of in terms of outcome out of sorts. That would be one that maybe you would be looking at, especially for that 24 versus Burnley, and thinking, yeah, that could be a great ace in the hole there in that 24. So yeah, another interesting sort of pickup there. One that I think has been mentioned a couple of times, as we mentioned in the chat as well. FN said that Foden is top of his list at the moment. I'm assuming it's their list at the moment. Sam, as a non-owner of Foden, it is probably a question for you more than anything else. You said we were calling on Bowen, and there's definitely been a lot of sort of conversations between you and I about Foden over the last few weeks, how much kind of Kevin De Bruyne's return is going to be impacting him. De Bruyne was quoted today saying that he's not expecting to play as many games as he used to in the past, which is kind of me paraphrasing him a little bit, I'm afraid. But that's kind of what he said, that he was expecting to play against Newcastle on the bench. A friend of the pod and FPL USA member for LEX, Alex at MCFC, was saying that he's expecting Foden to start 9 out of 10 next games, and loads of them through the centre as well, where he's devastatingly effective, as we're seeing. And he's really sort of growing into the player that I think we've all kind of thought he was going to become. Alex says that Newcastle, not too entirely sure what's going to happen there, but it sounds like if De Bruyne is saying he might find himself benched, then maybe he's going to play centrally. The Burnley, Brentford, Everton games, I mean, they're all very attractive if you're looking at Foden playing in an attacking role, Sam. So is he a player you're going to be able to resist, especially with double game week 2 on the horizon, potentially in 25, which is going to be Chelsea and potentially Brentford at home?
Yeah, he is probably currently top of my wish list in terms of midfielders. And I do go back and forth on it because it's not all pros, but there are a lot of those pros. I think he is coming of age in terms of he is now performance-wise hitting his stride. He is one of the most important players in that City team and one of the first names on the team sheet. If he's fit, if he doesn't need a rest, he's pretty much in that starting 11, like most people are saying, 9 times out of 10 now, if not slightly more than that. So from that point of view, I love him. I particularly love the fact that he's going to start playing centrally much more often. I'm still worried that that's not going to be all the time, but for a player of his ability and Man City's team ability, I don't think he needs to play there every single week to still be value for money at under 8 million. So I think that ticks all of those boxes. The first thing that I have in my consideration is the chip strategy question as well. So you mentioned the potential double in game week 25. Now, if I'm looking at free hitting that week, then bringing in Foden for that purpose is not necessarily a problem for me. So I can kind of put that to one side. Again, it depends where I land on that chip strategy, but
Sure.
the next week or two will probably inform my decision there. Now, so at this point, I'm treating it as if it's not going to be a problem free hit wise. So without putting that to one side, is Foden going to continue being the asset he has looked in the last couple of game weeks? I think he will tick over very nicely, but I don't think he's a particularly explosive player. At least historically, he hasn't been. 2 double-digit hauls so far this season, one of which was obviously the previous game week against Sheffield United. Now, you don't play Sheffield United at home every week, so that is another thing to consider. And of course, with Haaland coming back in, not only does that mean that Alvarez is going to be trying to take minutes in that number 10 role from him here and there as well, pushing Foden out wide maybe for the final 20 or 30 sometimes. But it also means that Haaland is now the focal point of the team again. That means that less chances are going to fall to Foden. He is encouraged quite publicly at times by Pep to pass the ball, even in a one-on-one, to give Haaland an absolute tap-in. And that is Man City's objective. So I do wonder, with Haaland back in the side, whether we see Foden just dropping off the numbers ever so slightly, where maybe because he's been playing with Alvarez up top, he has done a bit more of the heavy lifting in the key areas, because Alvarez isn't that out-and-out classic striker that we know Haaland to be. So it has affected City's system. Now, none of this is to say that Foden is a bad option. Like I said, he's still top of my wish list, but these are factors that I'm trying to weigh in and balance up against the pros, because I don't think it is all just as simple as Foden is the best option, end of discussion. I think there are some cons that are worth considering.
It's very choose your own adventure, I think, with Foden, because you can kind of you can spin the story, and I think you've done a good job there, Sam, of just exemplifying exactly that. However you want with Foden, you can kind of say, yeah, okay, he's great at the moment, but he's just had a really good kind of fixture, and you know, all these other players going to kind of muddy the situation. De Bruyne is back, etc., and so on and so on. But I mean, on the other side of it, you can kind of say, well, flourishing in the role at the moment.
Mm.
De Bruyne is himself being quoted as saying that he's expecting to kind of play a few less minutes. I kind of wonder whether at 32 years old, and with a hamstring that he said himself needs to be operated on, and we're looking at kind of the coda of his career. He gets kind of brought out as kind of like the prize sort of stallion to play a kind of a few exhibition matches. I'm not suggesting that's definitely going to happen because it is De Bruyne, but I wonder whether, as I've said, kind of a hopium kind of way, he's going to Foden, that is, and be the player, be the man, and kind of grow into that role as being kind of number two to Haaland. I completely agree as well that without Haaland being in the team, he of course assumes that amazing prominence. And if you've got De Bruyne and Foden both feeding Haaland, then we'll have to see how that sort of works. But there was a period last year, I think, when Foden became early on in the season, he was kind of number two kind of goal scorer because of the runs he was making for Haaland. And if he's making them from the centre rather than making them from the left, I think it's kind of to be seen exactly how that sort of works going forward. In terms of the kind of double-digit hauls, as you've said, over the last couple of years, Foden has got 4 in total each time. Last year, again, he's never really been the player who's got those kind of starts nailed. Last year, 22 starts, the most starts he ever got. 142 points was his best points total ever, and he got a price reduction to 7.5 for all of his trouble. So, yeah, an interesting one. But I think one that if he does, Dan, kind of, I guess, fulfill his immeasurable talent, I think he's going to be one who's going to be really interesting over the course of the rest of the season. I think a big kicker is, yes, I know what you're saying, Sam, about kind of the potential playing a free hit in 25, but there's not likely to be a blank in 26 for City as well.
Yeah.
So a player you could feasibly kind of hold in. Yes, there may be a rotation risk. It's all there is always one there. But if he is playing well, especially before the Champions League kicks back in around sort of March time, I don't know. He's one that I'm not particularly worried about, especially when in March, early March, that is, you've got big games for City. You've got Man United, Liverpool, Brighton, and Arsenal throughout March with the international break between Brighton and Arsenal. For those games, if Foden's playing well, I think it would be a bit of a shock if he doesn't show up. It feels like the FA Cup and cups are going to be where he's going to get his rest, right, Dan? So for me, I'm feeling like a smug Foden owner here. I don't know about you.
No, I feel the same. I wouldn't worry about bringing him in or owning him for this short period of time at least. I think we cross that bridge when we come to it. I think we will see a change when it happens. And for now, he's very safe in that team, I feel. He's getting the returns. They have the fixtures. They have a potential double. So I just think don't overthink it. And if you want to bring him in, go for it. Because like I said, I think it was last season we saw, like you said, at the beginning of the season, he was getting consistent returns. He was like the second highest scorer. And then all of a sudden, he was benched for like 3 or 4 game weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Just
on the naughty step.
All of a sudden, on the naughty
step. He was out partying.
Right, maybe. I don't think we're going to see that happen again. I think we might see some minutes reduced, but I think we act on it when that time comes. Because we're going to see a lot of changes in our FPL team around that time frame anyway. So I wouldn't be worried about bringing him in.
Nice. That's reassuring as someone very highly considering him. I was a little bit worried about some of those negatives, but you have both ganged up on me quite nicely to reassure me, which is quite helpful for me.
Yeah, perfect. Final kind of midfielders mention before we got onto the Haaland plans and put this kind of section to bed. There's one player who's performing really well tonight for United. This is Garnacho. So Dan, you said earlier on you're looking for a kind of a cheapish player, and Sam, you were saying, if kind of his price, he looks like a really good sort of enabler, doesn't he? If you are kind of trying to make sure that buying Salah back when it's required is fairly seamless. One of those players, Sam, who potentially is a starter at his price, despite kind of being quite, a very, very low cost enabling asset. Kieran FPL Discomfort in the chat just mentioned him as well.
Yeah, I was mentioning it to you earlier. Garnacho is like flirting with me very, very, very consistently at the moment. I like him a lot as an option. He's in my DMs. It's kind of weird, to be honest. I wish he'd stop. But yeah, no, Tottenham obviously as an onboard in 21 on the ticker doesn't look the best, but like Kieran in the chat says, a doggy up against Garnacho potentially could be quite a nice matchup. And even if he was playing on the other side, Porro, as we know, likes bombing forwards as well, so he should get space there. So don't mind that. Wolves are not a great fixture by any means, but it's fine. West Ham, Villa, then importantly in game week 25 and 26, where we're going to need teams that don't blank, especially in 26. Then you've got that Fulham at home fixture, which is looking pretty decent at that point. But importantly, with Garnacho, it does enable so much more with your side. You can easily switch it to a 3-4-3 if you want that triple attack of Haaland, Solanke, Watkins. Obviously, Bournemouth could get that double as well in game week 25. That's very possible. So switching to the 3-4-3 might be a nice strategy, and Garnacho would enable that. He also enables a much easier route back to someone like Salah from another midfield option, because you haven't spent all that money across 2 or 3 players, and you've probably kept it in your bank if you're playing Garnacho week in, week out as a 7th attacker. Now, he's not by any means the best pick in terms of the underlying data, in terms of what I expect the raw output to be. But for the value, I think he could be a very interesting pickup if it enables other moves elsewhere in the future, and it saves you from potentially having to take a -4 to get, or even a -8 to get back to Salah in game week 25, should they get the double. And it might just be one of those sneak picks that people overlook because, it's Man United, they're not playing very well, basically. And his data recently, especially, has been decent. And he is now pretty much nailed into that best 11, their starting lineup, and getting very, very strong minutes. 4.8 million for a team that it was playing in the Champions League this season. Regular starter. I really don't mind it.
Yeah, no, fair play. Next few fixtures: Tottenham, Wolves, West Ham, Aston Villa, Luton, and Fulham. Second best according to the Hub Analyse in terms of fixtures coming up. Could be, Dan, the answer to your prayers.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this as you're speaking. You might have twisted my arm here, because especially if I go for someone like Saka this week, if I want to bring in Haaland next week, I'm going to need someone probably even cheaper than 5 million. So Garnacho is my only real option. And I know Wolves away is not a good fixture to bring him in for, especially because I support them. However, I do want to make a point that we don't have Ryan Aït-Nouri, because he's in the AFCON with Algeria. He's actually a very good defender this season. We're going to miss him a lot. Just as much as Hwang, in my opinion, because we're going to have to play someone like Hugo Bueno at left back, or Matt Doherty. I don't fancy either of those two against Garnacho, so I don't think that's a bad fixture for him. So yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah,
all the reasons you stated.
Definitely a player that I'm. Yeah, it definitely, because I'm in the same situation to you. If we're turning our attention to round off the section for Haaland plans, so obviously if Haaland does seem like he's going to play Newcastle, I think that for a few of us, everything's going to change again. And we're going to be looking at kind of an enabler in that slot, which will then progress the likes of Garnacho into our thoughts and other sort of players into our thoughts. So I think Garnacho's third. I think it was for non-pen XG over the last 3 game weeks among midfielders. Last 6 game weeks among midfielders, which is really good for his price point. And so it's a player. I think McTominay is actually 4th. So this is one of those, isn't it? But it looks like he's kind of nailed down the right wing slot, as Sam's mentioned, and been kind of the answer to United's sort of prayers recently, just because there's always been kind of does Rashford get shuttled over there, which means that his entire sort of efficacy is completely curtailed. Really interesting pickup. Now, I think one that kind of could play a role for you if you are ready to overlook the dirtiness of buying a United player. So as long as you do take a bath after buying one, you'll probably be all right.
You do have to look at these guys in isolation too. I know they play for Man United. I know Man United are playing really terrible right now, but in isolation, for his price and for his XG and things like that, he's a good asset. And Man United, I know we're saying they're terrible, but they're still, what are they, 7th, 8th? So, relatively they've been terrible compared to where we expect them to be, but that's not a bad position in the table. We would happily bring in, we're talking about Wolves players, we're talking about Brighton players, they're below. So
middle of them,
and more expensive.
And more expensive. So I think we have to remove that Man United bias from our heads and just consider him a good asset for what he is.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I've got no qualms about bringing in United player if needs be, or any player from any sort of team if needs be.
Mhm.
That's for sure. So Haaland, just quickly, is one of those players who obviously is going to be figuring heavily in our minds. I'm kind of quite glad that I don't have to be looking at bringing him right now. I'm the sole Trent non-owner of the three of us, and for me, he's one that I've got kind of serious FOMO about. Just because, I mean, we spoke about it last week on the pod as well. When it comes to Liverpool, when it comes to Trent, and we were reflecting about the early doors, we were kind of like, oh, Trent's just too expensive for all of this. But with Salah and Son out of the picture, him being discernibly on fire, if you watch the games, and there's also in the underlying data as well for him, a player that I'm really interested in bringing in. And if Haaland is back this week, as I said last week on the pod as well, I'm looking at kind of missing out on either Trent or Saka. Whereas if I can leave Haaland for a week, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility that I do leave Haaland for a week, I can bring Trent and Saka in this week, which again, super boring, but it's quite good just to kind of, I suppose, get involved with that sort of pricey mantra of buying the players that you think can score the most points and leaving the expected data to one, the expected ownership to one side. So it definitely feels like I really like Haaland, just to kind of give it another week, really, let that ankle just really reset. It's a stress fracture, mate. Just have another week on the beach or whatever, and to kind of deal with it. So I'd be really hoping that this week I can do Trent and Saka, and next week kind of look at a Garnacho, potentially look at like a Cliver, or maybe even a Tavernier, like a player with a double coming up, bring them in and just kind of be attacker number 8, maybe even kind of Ross Barkley or something like that. But probably like Cliver, he's 4.6. He seems to be playing most of the time for Bournemouth at the moment. Got double coming for sure, and so might be one of those players. So I think that's kind of how it's kind of looking for me in terms of kind of taking a hit this week for Trent out, Trent in for Shimikas, who I've still got, very kind of team specific, of course, and then Salah out for Saka. Got loads of money, and then you can go Son to piece of rubbish, and then Darwin, give him Bournemouth, and then take him out for Haaland next week. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Sam, it's quite straightforward for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've barring any Haaland news, I don't think I'm going there either until we hear something more solid. I think the midfielder discussion is where I'm landing. I think that's where a lot of people are landing right now, and defense is kind of just sorting itself out for the week. So I think most likely with my 2 free transfers, I need to sort out the Salah and Son issues. There are a couple of other midfielders that are just about lingering in my thoughts that we haven't mentioned today. So just a quick 2 minutes on those other options. So Richarlison could be an option still, probably the strongest XG out of all of the options we're going to talk about today in terms of midfielders. KDB, I think, probably can't go there now because we just don't think he's going to start that Newcastle game. And then even after that, it's a question mark. Ødegaard was tempting, but again, his numbers have dropped off a little bit. So maybe lowering in the rankings for midfielders right now. And then you start looking at people like your Douglas Luiz's, maybe even your Leon Bailey's. You can potentially even look at Raheem Sterling, potentially, but I think at this point you're probably scraping a little bit. Yeah. One player that, again, it's Man United players in my DMs. I don't know what it is, but it's not Bruno. For some reason, I've got a weird feeling about Rashford. I've got a weird feeling he's going to be back soon, like in terms of back to his best. Playing off the left wing again. Assisted 1 goal tonight. I saw came up on my live score. So that's 3 in his last 3. He's gotten a return in. I do wonder if maybe we put our biases to one side on him. And I know he's so much more expensive than Garnacho, but he would be a major differential to come off and we know how explosive he can be. If he starts performing, all of a sudden he could be gangbusters. So I do want to keep one eye on someone like him just in case. But realistically, I don't know if any of you want to talk about the options I've mentioned there, but I think Foden is probably just about top of the billing right now for me. And then after that, maybe a Richarlison, maybe Garnacho, possibly even Jota. But 2 of those 4 or 5 options will be coming in, I think.
Yeah, I think Richarlison's one of the players that they've sadly been elbowed out of this discussion because we've got to move on to whole claims now. But another player I think that on the list, one that FPL Review is very keen for me to buy, yeah, a similar kind of, I think, kind of see the discussion about buying a Liverpool player for basically similar sentiment altogether. Copy and paste all of that, and yes, I think Richarlison again is another one who's been performing very well, who could well be in the discussion there. Right, we've got to move on to bold claims, I think, Sam, because we're an hour in now, nearish.
We do.
And so last week, bit of we're up to 4-4. You had Alvarez to blank, and he did not. So he did a goal, and I had 4+ goals in Spurs versus Villa, and I got that one. So it's 4-4, and you are in this week with
I am.
Turney.
Yeah, so player that we've obviously been hoping for the return of for quite a while. Tony to come back in. I think you tried to steal this bold claim off of me this morning, so it hopefully comes off.
I misread what I've written.
Okay, no worries. Well, anyway, 10+ points for return for Tony back from his ban. Obviously not the easiest fixture in the world. I don't imagine it will be easy for him to do so, but he did score a hat-trick against Southampton's under-23s the other day, so he's clearly banging form. So yeah, I'm going with bold claim of Tony to get 10+ points, which basically means more than one return in his first game back. And over to you.
Yep, so I had Darwin getting 10+ points versus Bournemouth. This was kind of predicated on the idea that we'd be selling Darwin for Haaland when we first kind of spoke about it. But I quite like it, and it's one of those where I think that there's definitely a sapping of confidence. I mean, is there any confidence in Darwin really? But definitely one of those where I feel like, you know, no, it was Southampton before, wasn't it? That he scored the brace against last year.
You bring that up every week.
The thing is, though, if you think about any player who's historically done loads of goals, if you say Southampton, you're probably about right.
Yeah,
aren't you?
Yeah, annoyingly.
So I mean, South Coast clubs, yeah, playing red-ish and stripes, yeah, it'd be fine. Yeah, so Darwin to haul 10+ points versus Southampton is where
Southampton.
Bournemouth is yeah, that's a really bold claim. Yeah, it's a really bold claim. That's how bold I'm going. Right, okay. Let's move on to questions this week. And pivoting off your kind of bold claim, Sam. Dave asks, "Are we interested in Tony as a potential Uber differential?" Dan, I think there's probably no room at the inn, right? We're both in a 3-4-3. I know, Sam, you're in a 3-5-2, so it's even more of a vexed question for you. But for us, Dan, with Darwin or another player who's like to go for Haaland, Solanke and Watkins, it kind of feels like you're looking at Haaland, Solanke and Watkins, just leaving the guys there. Solanke with an upcoming double, still performing well. Watkins, we know, underlying data is amazing. Haaland is Haaland, going to be the captain permanently for many of us. Is it guys no room at the end, or is he a player that you would be looking at potentially?
Yeah, I agree. There's no room. I think those three are clearly the best attacking assets right now. I mean, it's someone I'd like to keep my eye on though, because if he starts performing and starts getting the returns he was the previous seasons, then moving him in for someone like Watkins might be a nice way to differentiate yourself from the pack. But he's a wait and see for me. I wouldn't bring him in straight away. Do we even know he's going to start the next game for sure? Probably, right? I don't know.
I mean, he should do. Brentford need him, surely.
Yeah, they do. But yeah, I would wait and see, and I would certainly not take out Watkins or Solanke or avoid Haaland for him.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it, isn't it? No other way. And I think that if you are kind of enterprising, there'll be a player that everyone should be really interested in, just as kind of one of those sort of differentials. But even then, you know, there's quite a few floating around, like Cunha, who Dan has confirmed is on penalties, so definitely worth buying. And also, you know, you got Isaac at Newcastle, who's looking into kind of coming up into really good fixtures, and there's loads of players kind of floating around who could well be of interest. So one of those who's in the mix, you know, like Cunha, even like, I know he's had an injury this week, but Nkunku, like one of those players who we're going to have our eye on, probably not one we're going to be looking at buying right now. Another player who also maybe fits into this mix is Estepinian. So Nick, some guy called Nick, who used to be on this podcast apparently, says he's bought Estepinian early on to beat the template. Have we considered him now he's back and Bryson have a great run? And I think, Sam, maybe it's a similar sort of story, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, probably it is this week. Although I think in future game weeks, there's much more scope for bringing him in than potentially Tony at this point. Both of us have an injury in, or like a player that is basically a dead asset in our back line at this point. So I think you've still got Simicast. I've got Lascelles. I'm very interested in bringing Estupinan in the next few weeks when I have the transfer spare to do so. Hopefully, I can do that sooner rather than later, because I think that the run of fixtures Brighton has spells points for Estupinan. And I did have a brief look on FPL.team as to whether I could maybe forego a midfield transfer this week and sort out Estupinan this week instead, and maybe push a midfield transfer to next week and play 4 at the back. But I think the upside from some of the midfielders probably just about outweighs it. And then if I don't do that, it makes it more difficult for me to get to Haaland the following week as well. So unfortunately, in my current situation, I think in most people's situation, if you've got both Salah and Son, regardless of whether you've got 2 free transfers or not, it's quite difficult to go for Estupinan this week. But I think next week and beyond, I think if you're well set up, then he's a player that could easily find his way into a lot of teams pretty quickly.
I think this is somewhere where wildcarders have a bit of an advantage, because if I was on a wildcard last week or this week, I would have 100% put Estupinan in my team.
Yeah.
Because we're all going to be kind of stuck, like you said, transferring in and out midfielders for the next few weeks. And it's going to be difficult to bring him in without a hit, without avoiding bringing in a midfielder. So, yeah, if you have the funds to do it and if you have the means to do it, I think he's an amazing asset for the next run. And we've seen he can score amazing goals. He's done it twice in the cup, hasn't he?
I think the problem with Estupinan is simply this. So you've got Trent, Porro. In your case, you've got Trippier, Dan, or an Arsenal defender. In most people's cases, be it Saliba or some stupid people who've got White hanging around, or some even stupid people who've got both hanging around. So imagine the kind of the template back three is Saliba, Trent, Porro. Where are you going to lose a player? Dan and I have both mentioned that Haaland, Watkins, and Slanky looks like the kind of a template front three. Sam, you're up for Slanky, but that's by the by because you can get a good midfielder in. I just don't know whether you're going to be buying in a player that has that sort of potential to haul. I know Sam FPL Seagull on Clash Correspondence was saying that he's a really good asset, definitely worth buying, and we all know that. It's just where he fits into the overall sort of way you're going to be playing, because you're either going to be losing, but you could potentially lose the Arsenal asset because the fixtures are kind of changeable, and it's definitely the case that the SGC is great, but they're kind of suffering Cityitis potentially in terms of kind of conceding that one goal every week. So maybe that could be kind of the route in, but it's one of those where. Yes, it's 4.9. Maybe you could be kind of using the kind of the Trent sort of line of reasoning where you're kind of saying, well, I don't really want a midfielder at that price, but Estupinan is, given the fact that he position doesn't really matter to him. He's going to be in the box. He's in a central position when they're attacking, even though he's notional left back. So maybe you'd be playing a 4-3-3. It was one of those really where, in terms of the constraints of FPL, he's a difficult buy for a lot of people and difficult to kind of fit in. And for me, because I've got Shimikas to get rid of, maybe I'd kind of just do Trent, and then I kind of have a Saliba on the bench and do it that way. It's hard to see how he sort of fits in. But a player who, if he is there for you, and I think we're all kind of fairly envious, especially given the upcoming fixtures. We spoke about kind of Gross earlier on, maybe a Bonnotte or whatever, and Sam put across a couple of good points about why Gross maybe isn't the best player, but Dan's points as well were pretty kind of alluring about why Gross is kind of quite high up his list, and been a few kind of comments in the chat about him too. Maybe Estupinan would be the answer to that, where you kind of go, you know what, I'm not going to bother with midfielder, I'm just going to get a defender in. It could be a way of doing that. It's just one of those where it's very situational, and if you are in the position to bring in Estupinan and still kind of have a coherent team, you can play him every week, or the fixtures are really good. So I don't really see kind of, for especially the template team, how it's going to work with him at the moment. But that shouldn't put you off, because he is a really, really good asset, that's for sure. FPL Fella asks, does who you're captaining change who you're looking to transfer in? And I think that this maybe kind of links to Haaland, and for Dan, me buying Saka potentially could be kind of on this list. I mean, does it change us this week too much? I think that's probably a question we're going to kind of hold just for a second, because Chris also asks, is this a good week to take a hit with so many others looking to do the same? So I think maybe, Sam, we can kind of flip over to transfers and captains and try to kind of address all of these questions in both these questions in one go, because it works really well. So if we were looking to bring in Haaland, I think he'd be straight in, be captained. For me, I don't really know where I'm going with the captaincy to answer Fella's question. And if I was buying Saka, I think that would definitely be one that I'd be looking at for sure to be the captain. And to answer Chris's question, I think it is a good week to take a hit, because I think many others are looking to do the same. Sam has planned this very well, so he's got 2 free transfers, happy as Larry. For me and Dan, it's more of a vexed question, I suppose. So in terms of my team this week, I've got Leno in goal, whatever. Pedro Porro, Saliba and White. Taylor's currently on the pitch, but I've got Shimikas, who's going to be replaced, I think, by Trent if Haaland isn't fit. If Haaland is fit, then I think that it becomes a -8, and I think that still happens, but I don't get Saka in. Foden, Palmer, who currently has the armband, Gordon, and up front I've got Darwin, Solanke and Watkins. I think that I've got a bit of a question from... I think I'm going to just think out loud here a little bit, because I don't really know where the captaincy armband goes this week, and obviously it's been reflected by loads of people that this week is a really tricky week. So we've gone from having a plethora of options to kind of being like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing, because in the nature of the split game week, especially, it kind of feels, I don't know, good practice potentially to shove your captaincy armband on the player playing earlier on. I don't know whether that's just me, but I kind of feel like I want a player where I've got the information at least from their team, from their manager. I know it's an infinitesimally small percentage that a Saka, for example, is going to do his ACL. Obviously, I hope he doesn't. During training next week on the Arsenal's warm weather kind of training camp. But I kind of want my captain to be playing kind of the first half of the week, because at least it's kind of done. I'm happy. I know he's at least playing. So for me, I'm kind of looking at Palmer as being the captain kind of pick right now, and taking that hit. I'm happy to do it. I think it's a good week to kind of just bury a hit, as Chris mentioned. The only thing with Palmer is that I said to you, Sam, earlier that he's had 13 returns this season. Only 4 of them have come at home. So maybe there's something going on there. So maybe it has to be. Maybe I'll look at Saka or whatever. I'm glad there's a little bit longer to think about this. But I mean, captaincy wise, where are you both at the moment? Because it's quite an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'll quickly scroll over to my team, because I'm also on Palmer at the moment, and I think your fears about the home returns are merited, but I think it might just be a bit of an anomaly at the moment. I think it's a short enough sample size that probably balances out over time. It's a bit like Bowen scoring every week away from home. Like it's kind of a cool little fun fact that's going on, but do we really see any evidence to suggest why that is? I think there's maybe more so in Bowen's case than there is with Palmer. But I think both are just slight statistical anomalies regardless. In terms of the whole captaining a player at the start of this very long game week, I completely understand. But what I would maybe asterisk with is just saying it's probably just worth having the vice captaincy on one of those players if you're really convinced that a player in the second half of that game week is the way to go. Just having the vice captaincy on someone like Palmer, or possibly even Foden as well, if we don't hear anything about Haaland, could be a pretty good idea if you're confident they start, just in case something catastrophic happens in between now and when your captain is meant to play. At least you're shielded against them not playing at all. So I wouldn't be completely put off of backing a captain in the second half of the game week if you can cover it off with a good vice captain in the first half. That being said, I think Palmer's a great option this week. I think he ticks all the boxes. He's on penalties. The underlying data, even without the penalties, is very, very strong still.
Yeah.
I think the price puts off a few people, but more and more people are coming around to that idea. He is being spoken up a lot by content creators such as ourselves, annoyingly, but I still think he won't be the most favoured captaincy option. I just think he ticks a lot of the boxes, and Fulham aren't a tight defence by any means. Palace probably aren't the tightest of defences either, but Saka, I don't know, I'm just not getting the feeling on him this game week quite as much. And I could ebb and flow between. I could look at the data, and obviously Saka's data is still fantastic. As we mentioned earlier on in the pod, certainly wouldn't be putting off buying him. But I just have a bit of a gut feeling on Palmer against Fulham. It just seems like a nicer fixture on paper. And we know he's on penalties as well.
Okay. I also think that Watkins might be one. Maybe it's just me. But I know that we spoke about last week, Villa, XUC, very good in the top 6 for that. So it might be one that kind of is a good sort of vice if you are kind of going for Saka later on in the week. But I completely agree on Palmer. I think there might be quite a nice novelty as well, almost, to go with a player who's ostensibly very cheap. But obviously overall, we know from last week is in the top 20 and top 15 indeed for XGI so far this year, and as you say, ticks all the boxes. And I think at the moment he's where it's busting. Even if I buy in Saka, he's likely to be, I think, where I go. And I think a big sort of boon for his case is that Fulham are playing away at Liverpool on Wednesday. So early game on Saturday, likely to be potentially a bit tired, maybe. So it's one of those where I'm looking at it and thinking, yeah, okay, I quite fancy that, especially with Chelsea's really good team XG, as we mentioned last week too. What about you, Dan? Where are you on this?
Yeah, so I'm going to play the devil's advocate to stuff you've said, Tom, because I hate that I think this way, but my brain is kind of strange. So the psychology behind it for me is I don't like captaining players that play the first half of a long game week. Because if I captain someone like Palmer on, what is it, the 13th, and he doesn't do anything, we have to wait all the way until the 22nd, just looking at that failed captaincy. I know that's a stupid way of thinking, but I kind of get more enjoyment from the game. Captaining a player later on in the game week, so I have the excitement the whole week, and then putting my vice captain on someone like Palmer. So I know I have Bowen here right now. I haven't really thought about that, but I'm tempted this week to have a bit of fun with the captaincy because I think it's going to be wide open. So I am tempted by, if Bowen's fit, I am tempted by someone like Bowen. I'm tempted by Alexander-Arnold even, just going somewhere crazy like that just for a bit of fun. Because like I said, I think this is the week to have a bit of fun with it if you want to. And something about Palmer's putting me off. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's his price. I don't know if it's completely the fact that he plays first. But I don't know. He doesn't seem like the best option for me.
Is it the fact that Paulinho is world class, as FN said?
It could be. But yeah, I just know myself. I know that if I captain him and he gets 2 points, it's just the whole week's going to be like a bit of a drag, you know?
Yeah, FPL Compass said in the chat the green arrow decreases with the early captaincy. So you're kind of hoping it's one of those things, isn't it? Where it's like do you want to kind of draw 1-1 with a last minute goal for the opposition, or do you want to draw 1-1 with a last minute goal for you?
Yeah, exactly.
You go home happy or you go home disappointed, but in reality, it's the same outcome.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the game,
thing.
Our main goal here is to have some fun, at least in my opinion. So I just think it'll be more fun to captain a player later on in the week, going somewhere differential. I'm really tempted by Alexander-Arnold. I don't know if I'll go there, but super tempted by it.
I can't see Bournemouth not scoring. I know that we spoke about the SUC being decent last week. But yeah, the kind of the upside is always going to be there for Trent, and I can completely understand that as well. Could be one that's definitely in the mix, right, Sam?
Yeah, I do like Trent as an option. I think I agree. I echo your thoughts on Bournemouth probably scoring, but his underlying attacking data is very strong, and he looks like the guy now, especially with Salah gone for a little while. He needs to step up and be Liverpool's main man, basically, which sounds a bit weird for a right back, but he has been one of their main men for quite a while now, and it looks a bit like with Foden, like he's finally come of age and become a real leader in that squad. So I do wonder if he's going to be the player that sort of carries them through this period without Salah, and everything just runs through him at this point. I can just picture it. I can see him scoring a worldie from outside the box. I can see him doing the shush. I can see the whole lot. And like Dan, I do like the idea of captaining someone a bit later on, because at the end of the day, it's the hope that gets you, isn't it? You want that opportunity open to you to save your game week. The only thing that I'd say against that is there's no worse feeling than if you haven't backed an early captain and they've completely exploded. So if Palmer goes off and you haven't picked that up, then all week you're going to be looking at that thinking there's no way Trent matches that. So it does go both ways. I know it's much more likely that Dan's scenario happens where you've got that hope still, but it does go both ways. That's all I'll say on the matter. But yeah, I think like Dan says, wide open captaincy call this week. You could easily go with someone very differential and it pay off. So yeah, I wouldn't be scaring anyone off of going for someone like Trent, someone like Bowen, even the likes of Foden away at Newcastle. I don't completely hate either. So yeah, I think this week we should see a split crowd.
Okay.
I also live in California on the West Coast. Sorry, so Chelsea versus Fulham is at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Oh wow!
Whereas
so wake up to a captaincy hall. That's what I love being. When I was in Hong Kong, when I go to Hong Kong, it's great because you can wake up to the results. It's amazing.
Could be.
Imagine waking up to a captaincy blank though.
I've done that. I've done that many times.
I'm just picturing on that Sunday, it's 8:30 a.m. in the morning. I'm watching Bournemouth and Liverpool, and Trent gets that worldie from outside the box to give me a huge green arrow. I can really picture it.
Nice. That's a good way to start the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right. So if we flip back to your team then, Sam. So answering the question from Chris about the -4 as well. A good week to hide one. What are you looking at doing this week?
Yeah, I think it is potentially a good week to hide one, although more and more of the crowd that I'm seeing on Twitter, X, and different podcasts I'm listening to, I think less and less people are trying to take the -4 because they think it will give them that advantage. So I do wonder how many hits are going to actually start flying. But I think because I've got 2 free transfers, that it does make it less likely I'm going to need to take it. I think if Haaland's fit, that increases my likelihood of taking the -4 exponentially. It would probably look at being Salah, Son and Darwin out for Haaland and then 2 midfielders as discussed. Like I mentioned, Foden is probably going to be one of them, and then it's pretty open on the other one at this point. Although talking about Garnacho has been quite tempting today. But yeah, I think if I can miss out on the -4, that would be fantastic. I do wonder about how heavy that the hit taking is going to be in the community this week. I think there'll be quite a lot, but I don't think it'll be quite as many as maybe we were previously expecting. I think a few people are starting to come around to the idea of potentially hiding one of Salah or Son on the bench for a week. Especially Salah on the off chance that game week 25 comes in and he's back by then. But yeah, I think I'm most likely getting rid of both of them.
Okay, cool. And same question to you, Dan, finally.
I've been kind of hit averse this season and it's been working out quite well for me. So I consider not going for hit kind of like an assist in a way, is the way I've been looking at it. I'm perfectly fine if needs be bringing someone like Cameron Archer on or even Ethan Pinnock just for 1 week this week and avoiding a hit. But it's kind of reliant on that Bowen injury as well. I'm quite happy to avoid Haaland this week and going for him next week with a -4. It's going to require a -4 because I have 1 free transfer, which is another reason why I want to avoid a hit this week. So for me, it's going to be Son out, and then I just have to decide who it is I bring in. Do I get Saka, forcing me to bring in Haaland and someone really cheap like Garnacho next week? Or do I go cheaper this week? And then it allows me next week to bring in a more expensive midfielder along with Haaland. So that's the only decision I really have to make. I'm quite happy to play Trippier at home to Man City. Why not?
Yeah.
They might win 1-0. Who knows?
Yeah, we've got the same, haven't we, with Sam, with Gordon? That it's kind of like, well, might as well, really, because there's always going to be that moment of Man City, the collapse in concentration, even an assist or something like that for him is going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah, there's definitely a goal potential on the cards for Newcastle, especially at home as well. And they've had quite a nourishing, rejuvenating win against their rival Sunderland in the Cup. So you'd think that with a little bit of a break as well, potentially coming, that they'll get bodies back. They'll feel a little bit fresher soon. This could be an opportunity for them to kind of put out a bit of a marker going into the second half of the season where they are hoping to turn their fortunes. So yeah, I don't mind playing a Newcastle player on the off chance that they bag something against City.
Yeah, definitely. And just to answer John's question, Sam, how long do we persist with Darwin? We both own him. I think that this is literally the last week. I think the last chance saloon. If Mr. Haaland is not, it doesn't seem to be fit. In Pep's conference on Friday, which is obviously going to be completely useless to man or beast.
Yeah, I think this is probably the final week. If we don't get news on Haaland, then I'll probably be happy enough starting him against Bournemouth. And then after that, I think I can probably move away from him regardless. I do want Solanke as well at some point. And Haaland, if he doesn't come back this week, we would definitely expect him to be back in game week 22. So I think all signs point to Darwin needing to go pretty soon. It's just whether or not it's this week. But in a way, I kind of hope we do get Haaland news that he is starting, just so I can get him out of my side and never have to worry about it again. Although to be fair, he has gotten 2 returns in his last 2, so it's not all hate from my part. I do have at least a nice taste at the end of some Darwin points, which has made it less bitter for me. But yeah, he still does need to go. I think, and even though Salah's gone and he'll probably get more of more responsibility to actually find the back of the net, I still don't back him to necessarily do so with any meaningful consistency. So I think he's got to go in the next 2 weeks. It's just when Haaland's back, and that'll either be this week or next week.
Yeah, he can't play Southampton every week, can he? Let's be fair.
No, if only.
Right, there we go. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for listening. Just short of 90 minutes this time. We've been going on during the Man United game. I just noticed they've bagged their second as we're recording now. So I'll go check out, see if Garnacho, my boy, is hauling in the background for me. I'm not sure he has, but either way, 90 minutes in. Thank you all so much for listening today. And thank you very much, Dan, for coming on the podcast as well. We really appreciate your time on the show. It's been great fun. In the meantime, we have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL. You can find me at FPL Pricey. And Dan, are you just at FPL Blackwolf? Is that correct?
At FPL_Blackwolf.
Underscore. Always an underscore. I love it.
Always an underscore.
And are you on Threads or Instagram at all?
I am, but I only really use it to post my team. I'm very active on X, and that's really it.
Fair enough. Well, on Instagram and Threads, WGTA can be found at WGTA.FPL. I'm just FPL Pricey on there as well. If you did enjoy the pod, then we'd really appreciate it if you could follow us on those socials, especially Dan as well. And also, if you could give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to, that would be fantastic. If you're tuning in live, I noticed there's been a few of you today. Then please do feel free to leave us a like, and importantly, subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss out on any future content. It really does go a long way for us. So thank you all so much for your ongoing support. And particularly, again, thank you, Dan, for coming on to the show. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Lovely. Cheers, Dan, for coming on. Really good. We'll get you on again. And thanks, Sam, as well, just for being here, and popping a lot of Southampton related banter. I hope you enjoyed the pod. Really looking forward to FPL coming back now after having a discussion. I'm a bit worried about the chance I'm going to make. I'm sure it's going to be an absolute mess. But we hope we assist you plan for the hectic period ahead. Well, less hectic than it was before, but you know what I mean. We'll speak next week, or maybe earlier if there's a huge injury. Speak to you soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist?